Conference Championship Week has wrapped up, the college football playoff is set, and all bowl games have been announced. Who has the easiest path to the national championship? Will Brent Pry and company enjoy a mayonnaise bath on January 3rd in Charlotte, North Carolina? Only time will tell. All that and more on the 2024 finale of the 3304 Sports Kickoff.
From the Marsh Arts Center studio in Blacksburg, Virginia, I'm Miles Jordan alongside Cody Wagner for this edition of the 3304 Sports Kickoff Show, the last show of 2024. Cody, it's been a great year in the studio, has it not?
Yeah, no doubt. It's such a great time getting to come in here. All the help we have on the back end from both Kyle Marshak and Robert Bateman. Like to shout our guys out at the top of the show. But our final show might be the most jam-packed of the year. We start looking at the results of the 2024 Conference Championship games, which have shaped the brand new 12-team CFP format. Oregon took down Penn State to win the Big Ten title in their first season in the conference and remained undefeated on the season under head coach Dan Lanning.
Georgia knocked off Texas in overtime to win its second SEC title in the past 5 years and its second game against the Longhorns this season.
Arizona State looked great, handily taking down Iowa State to capture its Big 12 title in its first year in the conference as well.
Boise State stayed rolling over UNLV in the Mountain West Championship and punched its ticket to a first-round bye in the college football playoffs behind potential Heisman running back Ashton Jeanty.
Clemson wins yet another ACC championship under head coach Dabo Swinney in a game that went down to the wire over the SMU Mustangs.
The Army Black Knights took care of Tulane in the American Conference Championship in its first year in the conference and are now preparing to take on the Navy Midshipmen tomorrow, Saturday, December 14th.
Well, to give you a more in-depth look at the conference championship madness from this past weekend, here's Hayden Tolbert and Tucker Terry.
It's the most wonderful time of the year. Finals are soon to be over, Christmas is coming, and conference championship weekend gave us one of the best days of football we've seen all year. In the new 12-team college football playoff format, 5 conference champions are guaranteed to get in, including one from each of the major conferences, and then the best non-conference power champ. In this case, that is the winner of the Mountain West title game. Let's hop into the highlights from each major contest from last weekend. We'll start with the Friday night game, where Boise State and UNLV faced off for the Mountain West Championship. The Broncos wasted little time out of the gate as Madsen threw this beautiful ball to Caples for a 22-yard touchdown strike. UNLV kept the game within one possession for most of the half, but there's some players you can't stop, you can only hope to contain. Ashton Jeanty is that guy, breaking away for a 75-yard score to end the half. The Heisman hopeful, and for what it's worth, my Heisman choice, ended the night with 209 yards. He's just 132 short of breaking Barry Sanders' near 40-year record. However, the Rebels were not done. 4th and 1 on Boise's 31, Greg Burrell took off up the middle to put UNLV on the board. The Rebels actually got the ball back and had it on the Broncos' goal line, but they couldn't get it done on a long 4th and goal, effectively sealing the deal for Boise State to the final of 21-7. UNLV will face Cal in the Art of Sport LA Bowl, while Boise awaits the winner between Penn State and SMU as the 3 seed in the college football playoffs.
Let's check out the Big 12 championship between two 10-2 squads, Arizona State and Iowa State. Iowa State hung in there for a quarter, but from then and on, it was the Cam Scatabo show. Breaking tackles left and right, the defense just couldn't bring him down. This 47-yard run set up an ensuing goal line opportunity, with Scatabo capitalized with a touchdown. Here he turns another should-be short-yard pickup into a 53-yard gain with a few broken tackles. Scatabo ended with over 200 total yards and 3 touchdowns. The Sun Devils just marched down the field at Will Levitt throws a beautiful fade ball to Guillory to put the Arizona State up 3 scores. Under pressure to make a play, Iowa State QB Rocco Beck tried to force one in, which got picked off by Keith Abney. Beck's 9th interception of the season essentially sealed it for Arizona State. To put the icing on the cake, Levitt launched another back shoulder bomb to Guillory, this time for a 21-yard score. The Sun Devils, who will take on the winner between Texas and Clemson in the college football playoff, cruised to a 45-19 win over Iowa State. The Cyclones will end their season with a showdown against Cam Ward and the Miami Hurricanes in the Pop-Tarts Bowl.
Let's move on to the SEC title game, which was a rematch between two of the top 5 teams in the country, Texas and Georgia. After a largely uneventful first half offensively, injury struck for the Bulldogs as starting quarterback Carson Beck suffered an apparent elbow injury on this chaotic Hail Mary attempt. Beck is 24-3 over his last 2 seasons as a starter, and Georgia now faces the possibility of entering the playoffs with unproven Gunnar Stockton running the show. Georgia started the second half with the first touchdown of the night as Trevor Etienne plowed his way to the end zone for a 10-yard touchdown carry. This gave the Bulldogs a 13-6 lead. Early in the fourth, Texas answered with their first touchdown on a 41-yard catch and run from Ewers to Moore on a slant route. That tied the game at 13 apiece. The back and forth play continued as a cool, calm, and collected Bert Auburn sent the game to OT with a 37-yard field goal. Texas was forced to settle for yet another field goal in overtime, allowing Georgia and a handicapped Carson Beck to get the ball last. This proved to be their downfall, as Trevor Etienne got the ball and ran it up the middle for a 4-yard game-winning score, giving Georgia the SEC crown in a 22-19 overtime victory. Texas, despite the loss, is the 5 seed and will face Clemson in the first round of the college football playoffs. Georgia, meanwhile, jumped up all the way to the 2 and will face the victor of Notre Dame versus Indiana.
Now, Cade Klubnik is going back to his home state in Texas to play Texas, so that's quite a story. Let's move on to the ACC Championship, where the Clemson Tigers took on the SMU Mustangs. Klubnik faked a design QB run and fired a 35-yard touchdown strike to a wide-open Bryant Wesco Jr. to put the Tigers on the board less than 2 minutes in. While Clemson went up 2 touchdowns early, Kevin Jennings took off for a 24-yard rushing touchdown, cutting it back down to just 1 possession. Klubnik continued the hot start, firing another 43-yard strike to Wesco up the seam. Klubnik ended the night with 262 and 4 touchdowns. Despite a 17-point fourth quarter lead, Jennings and SMU wouldn't go away with a 20-yard back shoulder dart to Hibner. With 20 seconds to go, Jennings threw one more strike to Daniels, seemingly forcing the second overtime conference championship of the day. Miraculously, Clemson worked their way up the field and got into deep field goal range with a must-win kick to make the playoffs. Nolan Hauser, with the ice in his veins, drained the 56-yarder for the win. Because SMU is able to keep the game so close, they earned a spot in the college football playoff bid and face Penn State in the Beaver Stadium. Clemson is the only power conference champ to not get a bye, and they will face Texas in the first round.
Finally, we'll check out the highly anticipated Big Ten Championship between number 1 Oregon and number 3 Penn State, a game that essentially decides the 1 seed and a bye in the college football playoffs. Right off the bat, Heisman finalist Dylan Gabriel found Kenyon Sadiq for an acrobatic 28-yard hurdling touchdown. Oregon took over the shootout in the early going, but the Nittany Lions would not go away. Drew Alar found the gap in the Ducks zone, firing a 22-yard seam ball for an Amari Evans score. Unfortunately for Penn State, they just had no answers for Gabriel. Including this on-the-run beautiful strike to Tez Johnson, Gabriel went for 283 and 4 scores with no picks. Drew Alar was able to work some magic, somehow staying upright to throw this 3rd touchdown of the night and make it just a single possession ball game. But it wasn't enough, as a late interception on a go route sealed the deal for the Ducks in a 45-37 thriller. Penn State hosts SMU in the first round of the college football playoffs in what should be an electric environment in the whiteout crowd. Oregon claimed the number 1 overall seed and will take on the winner of Ohio State versus Tennessee.
With that being said, all major conference champions have been crowned, and there is nothing left to do but watch the long-awaited 12-team playoff for the first time in history of the sport. Guys, back to you.
Thanks, guys. Great stuff as always. Now that we have crowned our conference champions, we look ahead to the college football playoff for the first season with a 12-team bracket and review Sunday's crazy selection.
Yeah, no doubt, Miles. It was certainly crazy. There was a lot of stuff going on, and the real uncertainty was surrounding who would receive the last at-large bid, particularly between SMU and Alabama. What are your thoughts on the committee's final decision?
I mean, we've got two very talented teams here, but I think the biggest part at the end of the day is that Alabama is a 3-loss team. They lost to 6-6 Vandy. They got blown out by a 6-6 Oklahoma. They have a loss to Tennessee, who is a playoff team, but at the end of the day, they would have been the only 3-loss team in the playoffs, and I really just don't think that made sense to the committee. Now, SMU, on the other hand, only have 2 losses on the season. They lost to BYU early on in the season, but really kind of found their footing. They made it to the ACC championship, fell short to Clemson, but I really just don't think that you can be penalized for making it to a conference championship game, and I do think that the committee made the right decision. Another interesting piece to this was that Boise State slid into the 3 seed as the Mountain West Conference champions. How do you think they factor into this whole thing?
Well, it's interesting to see, right? Because Boise State has been a good football team all year. Even that close loss to Oregon early in the season by 3 points on the road, you got to think that they factor in big time come college football playoff season. And for you personally, Miles, who do you think has the easiest path to calling themselves national champions?
See, I think it's really hard to look at because with the 12-team bracket now, there's a lot of different ways that you can look at this bracket. Of course, you have the 4 teams with the bye, Oregon the 1 seed, Georgia the 2 seed, Boise State the 3 seed, and then Arizona State the 4 seed. But then you do have these 8 teams that are on the outskirts. And I think the biggest thing with these opening round games is that the home team gets home field advantage. The higher seed gets home field advantage. So we're going to see a Penn State whiteout game against SMU, which is really going to kind of play to their advantage in that game. Ohio State, you'd like to say the home field advantage benefits them, but we did just see them lose to Michigan just a few weeks ago, so I mean, may not kind of play to their favor as much. Texas, they're playing Clemson. Clemson barely just kind of snuck in there at the end. I do think that Texas has a good chance to win this and go on to face Arizona State. But I think really when it comes down to it, I think Penn State might have the easiest path, at least to the semifinals, where they, one, take on SMU, and then they move on to take on Boise State, who's been tested this year and showed up against Oregon. But besides from that, that's really their one only test for the year. So I think playing a big team like Penn State might be a little bit of a challenge for them. And I think that Penn State at least might have the easiest route to getting to the semifinals, back to that typical 4-team college playoff, as you would say. Now we shift our focus back home and key in on Virginia Tech football. It was announced this past weekend that the Hokies would be playing the Minnesota Golden Gophers in the Duke's Mayo Bowl. Let's take it to our very own Carter Hill for a more in-depth look at the Hokies' postseason appearance.
Well, the transfer portal is finally open, and it's one of the more mayhem times throughout all of college football. So how does Virginia Tech and this man, Brent Pry, respond? Going into a crucial 4th season in Blacksburg, Virginia Tech has quite the dichotomy compared to a season ago. The Hokies, going into 2024, returned 20 of 22 starters. Right now, going into 2025, 6 of 22. Just 6. Let's look at how Virginia Tech is going to address these offseason needs. Looking at the offensive line, that's my first concern, because right now, Virginia Tech only is going to return 2 starters from this past season. They have 11 scholarship offensive linemen heading into 2025. And actually, on a little bit of a softer note and a less relevant note, Virginia Tech only has 8 scholarship offensive linemen available for the Duke's Mayo Bowl. Are the Hokies going to have enough bodies in Charlotte? We'll see. You got to address the offensive line. And again, offensive linemen in the portal are as tough to find as ever. First off, NIL evaluations, that's one thing. Second of all, I don't know how many bodies will actually be available. Second of all, the safety room. By the way, Jalen Stroman, who missed this past season after suffering a collarbone injury in the Vanderbilt game, he's in the portal. So is Mose Phillips. Going into his junior season, Phillips was supposed to play a massive role in 2025, and for undisclosed reasons, maybe we can guess, he's in the transfer portal. Offensive lineman and the safety room. How does Virginia Tech respond? We'll see. The third point I want to make is what is going to happen in the quarterback room in Blacksburg. Kyron Drones and Pop Watson are both expected to return, but realistically, how possible is that going to be? In today's day and age, 2 proven guys coming back to 1 season is not all that common. So, theoretically, let's just throw it out there. If one of them goes into the transfer portal, what does Virginia Tech do? Well, likely you roll into next season with either Drones or Pop Watson as your guy and bring in another quarterback to compete with them during fall camp. I think that's the biggest thing to zero in on if you're Virginia Tech. Again, the offensive lineman, the safeties room, and in the quarterback room. And again, I do want to be clear, nothing has happened yet with Kyron Drones or Pop Watson. But if it does, how do the Hokies respond? That's the big thing. Again, this is going to be a crucial fourth season for Brent Pry and Blacksburg. How do they respond in the portal? That is going to be the question of the offseason. Forget the Duke's Mayo Bowl. Virginia Tech, Minnesota, that's great. But the portal is at the forefront of the conversation. Guys?
Let's delve into Virginia Tech and the unknowns that surround this team heading into the Duke's Mayo Bowl, particularly at the quarterback position. There's 3 potential starters for the bowl game. So you can take us through each of those potential signal callers and who's most likely to make the start for the Hokies.
Well, as of this morning, we have breaking news from the Hokies head coach Brent Pry, who announced that quarterback Kyron Drones elected not to put his hat in the transfer portal and will remain in Blacksburg for his final year of eligibility. However, he is unlikely to start in the Duke's Mayo Bowl, meaning that redshirt freshman Pop Watson is expected to get the start against the Golden Gophers. Watson threw for 254 yards and a touchdown against UVA in the Commonwealth Clash 2 weeks ago, housed one with his feet, and recorded 48 yards on the ground. It is still unclear whether Colin Schlee will be available after the new year, after he left the Hokies matchup against Duke after taking a massive hit on the final play of the first quarter. Pry also announced that players who declared for the NFL draft will sit out of the bowl game, meaning that defensive tackle Antoine Powell-Ryland, defensive tackle Aeneas Peebles, and wide receiver Daquan Felton will remain on the sidelines for Tech's final game. Running back Bashal Tootin and cornerback Dorian Strong have yet to declare for the draft, but if they do, they will join their aforementioned Hokies on the sidelines against the Golden Gophers. Tech also had 18 players enter the transfer portal, and it is still unclear if those players will see the field against Minnesota. But with that news, how would you assess their bowl game performance?
Yeah, I think for Tech fans, you kind of got to look for who are going to be the guys of the future for Virginia Tech, right? You're going to get to see Pop Watson most likely, a lot of new faces on the defensive end as well for Virginia Tech, and that's kind of how you got to look at it. Who is going to be the future big stars for the Hokies? And another interesting thing to look at in this game is the Minnesota side of things. They were 7-5 on the year during the regular season, and head coach PJ Fleck has led this team. They're 5-0 in bowl games since he's been their head coach. What are the bright spots for them?
I mean, I think you just touched on a big one. They're 5-0 when it comes to their bowl games under their newest head coach. I mean, that's a really big step, and they're hoping to get their 6th straight against the Hokies this year. I think if you look at their quarterback, Max Brosmer, he had a great season. He threw for 2,611 yards. He had 17 touchdowns, limited interceptions, threw only 5. So I think that's another really big bright spot in them. His best performance came against Maryland. Threw for 320 yards, 4 touchdowns, no interceptions. So he's really proven that he can play at a high caliber level and against good quality defense such as the Hokies. So I think that's a good one. They were able to compete against number 6 Penn State just a few weeks ago. So once again, just a lot of bright spots for this team who are coming up against a Hokies team that we're still kind of uncertain on how the players are going to look on both sides of the field. So I think we have a better idea of how the Golden Gophers are going to look, and maybe it's still a little bit unclear on who we're going to see on the field on January 3rd for Virginia Tech. But that's all that we have for you today inside the Moss Art Center studio. Thank you to our production crew in the back, our reporters Hayden Tolbert, Tucker Terry, and Carter Hill. He's Cody Wagner. I'm Miles Jordan saying so long, and until next year, we hope you have a great Christmas and happy holidays.